Hey guys, it's Jordan, and today I'm super excited to be showing you my brand new Klangkuenstler style hard melodic rave techno tutorial. I'm going to be talking to you guys about a bunch of new stuff today, some new ideas and kind of new ways of doing things that I haven't shown you yet before. And yeah, as usual, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that for this video is available right at the top of the description. For just $5, it really helps support me. If you guys enjoy these videos, definitely go pick that up. And yeah, let's dive in. Alright, so this is the project file. We are at 139 BPM, and the first thing that we have up here is the rumble kick. Now this rumble kick is being made in a little bit of a different way from the way that I usually show you. So this is the first new thing I have to show you guys today. So the way this is being made is essentially we have kind of like the same setup as a normal rumble where we have, just our kick on its own, and then the rumble being sidechained to it. But the difference here is that we're actually using a tom. So yeah, it's a little bit of a different way of doing it. Usually you would want to use your kick, or maybe you would create it with a rumble or with a bit of reverb. But essentially what we're doing here is we are just taking this tom. Like, I'll play the sample. Literally just like live drums. And then it's just playing 16th notes. Same way you would do if you were making a rumble using the kick or something like that. But the interesting thing here is that you just get this more like kind of airy bass, right? Like it's very like a rumble made with a kick is very like deep kind of in the ground. This is a lot more like above, right? And it just kind of gives your bass a more interesting texture, and I think it can cut through a little bit better too, because if you listen, and if I turn that off, you can really hear it's missing. Right, like that kind of range. It's just going to fit in really well. It's not going to clash with the kick, or even with that Basin thing. And then for the sound, so it's that tom going into a low pass filter. So that's the first thing. You're usually going to want to low pass it, because if we turn that off, you can hear like, yeah, that's not really what we want. So we got that, and then it's being reverbed a little bit. You can see it's a really short reverb. Here's without that, and then with it. So it just adds a little bit of texture onto the bass. I have a compressor, which is just sidechaining it to the kick. I have an EQ here, which is cutting out even more high end, and also cutting these frequencies below 25 hertz. So just kind of cutting out the stuff that you wouldn't really be able to hear anyway, but it's going to add mud to your mix. And I'm also boosting the frequencies where this is the most prevalent. And then finally, we just have a utility converting it to mono. And yeah, so a little bit of a different take on making a rumble kick. I think that these sound really good. Like, you get a very nice texture with this type of kick, and it's just something a little bit different that you don't hear in every track. Then we have these old school rave loops, which sound like this. Which individually, we have this one. And then this one. So you can hear these are like those kind of classic style of loops, like you get from like sampling old tracks and stuff like that. So essentially, we have two of these in here. And the idea behind these is like, there's certain sounds that you really can't get without loops. Like if you listen to these, there's a lot of texture there. And it's because there's generations of like, first this was like a drum break, and then someone resampled it, and then they put it like in a trance track, and then somebody resampled that, and then it became like a techno track, and then like by the time you finally get to it, there's been so much done to it that like it's got so much texture and so much character and so much going on that like you just really couldn't recreate this. Like I could sit here with these samples, the individual sounds, and try to program them exactly like that. It's just never going to get exactly that same sound. So it's important to be able to blend these elements with the stuff that's being programmed. And then for processing on that, we just have an EQ8 here, just boosting a little bit of highs. And then on the first one, we have some drum bus and then a high pass filter. And I'll show you what I mean too. Like, if I turn these off in the overall mix, the drums are a bit flat, right? And then when we turn them on, it's going to give you that constant like kind of thing in the background. Then we have these rolls. which are actually kind of like accentuating what's happening with those, because essentially, so here's the loops on their own, and then with the rolls. So you can hear it's just adding a little bit more rhythm to that, kind of adding more of the like kind of vibe. And all it is it's just these two little samples here inside of a drum rack. Just a simple way to kind of add to that group. And also it kind of makes the loops your own, right? Like it helps to obscure them and really takes it and like kind of gives it a more modern feel. And yeah, then we have this clap. This is something I believe I've shown a little bit on this channel before, but essentially, this is how you make one of these big, hard techno claps, right? Like, because when you hear these tracks, it's not just like a little, like, regular 808 or 909 clap on its own, or like the kind of clap you might use in like a house track or something like that, you know? It needs to be very punchy. It's almost like a snare, but it sounds like a clap, right? And so essentially the secret to that is distortion. You can see we have two stacked here. I've got this pedal and then this overdrive. So here's just the pedal. And then with the overdrive, that's what really blows it out and makes it feel really full. And then the secret out here that's also happening is you can see I've got a really short reverb. And the dry wet is on literally 0.8%. Like you shouldn't even hear this at all, but because of the distortion, it gets pulled up. And if you do it any more than that, you can see like it starts to become too much pretty quick. So we got that. And yeah, that's pretty much how you do that though. Like I think the key here is really just going to be stacking the distortions, because one, you can get a lot of different textures out of that because it's going to be like just different from just using one distortion. But two, I think that it really allows you to like perfect the sound as well. Like it's not just about getting like a different texture, but it's about really being able to go through and like having like a lot of things you can tweak so that you can really make it your own. Then we just have this 909 hi-hat. You know, pretty standard stuff there. We have this ride, which is also just a 909 ride. The main thing with that one is just keeping it tuned pretty low so that you get that deep, like. Then we have the Basin. So this is essentially playing the progression, right? What's happening here is these are really just one note at a time. When it's jumping up here, it's just, we're doing like. And then all these extra notes up top are just octaves of all the root notes that are being played there. So it's pretty simple as far as that's concerned. But then what makes this one interesting is it's not just da-da-da-da-da-da, but you get this da-da-da-da, like that held out note, that one, that one. Like having that one held out note can kind of create a more interesting pattern, and I think that that's what you want to aim for with something like this. Like, don't just do the art bass where it's just going up and down, but really have that like that note that's just being held out there and like letting that like, you know, playing with like taking a note out here and there and stuff like that. I think can really be very fruitful for something like this and make it very catchy. And as far as writing the progression goes, I mean, it's all stuff, like, we're in the key of A minor, so it's pretty much just all stuff in there, right? Like, we got A, C, D, like, root note, minor third, fourth, sixth, minor seventh, root note again. Like, if you know what you're doing in the scale, the thing is, I think people think there's some, like, magical theory to, like, getting certain feelings, and yes, there is a bit of that, but really, it's not about being like, okay, I'm gonna go from the root note to the fourth here because I want to make people sad and think about their childhood. Like, it doesn't really work like that. It's really more like, okay, I know I know what this key is. I know, like, where the different notes in the scale are. Let's just try a lot of different ones and see which ones come out. Like, that's kind of how I did this. Like, it's not about, like, again, knowing, like, oh, yeah, like, because this perfectly is going to make you feel this emotion. Like, don't worry about that kind of stuff. You're just confusing yourself. Again, just get to know the scale, and then you can play around and just find different stuff that's going to work really well. And yeah, so that's how we did that. And then for the actual sound here, it's made with 2 layers. So what's happening here is we have one wavetable, which is just a saw wave with a bunch of unison. It's also got a little bit of a low pass filter on it. And then we have one which is a saw wave with no unison. And the reason is because with unison it sounds good, but it doesn't really have as much definition, right? You can't hear like each individual note as well. And then this one without the unison, it's got tons of definition. But obviously, it doesn't really have that fullness to it. So you're just putting them both together and you get the best of both worlds. And then we're multiband distorting it. So you guys have seen me do this before. Essentially, we have a high chain. A mid chain. And a low chain. Which the low chain doesn't even have any distortion on it. But we're just multiband distorting this simply for the fact that, like, you get different textures this way, and this allows you to kind of control it a little bit more. Like, if I take this pedal and just put it on the whole thing, you can see you don't really get that good of a sound, right? Like, it's just kind of like this washed out, like, mid-rangey thing. So this just allows you to, like, keep the definition in the low end, but then, like, get that pedal on the high end where it sounds really good. It's just that it doesn't sound good on everything else. So we're just, like... And same deal with this, like this amp, like, if we just put that on all of this, you can see it's not a very good sound, right? But it sounds really good on the mid-range, so we can put it just on that and get that thing that we like there. So that's why we do that. And then I just have a high-pass filter, and then this auto pan to make it sound like it's sidechained to the kick. Because I was trying to sidechain this to the kick, but I think with some of these harder kicks, if you just sidechain something to it, it can get kind of weird and messed up. So I just did it this way. And yeah, then we have this lead. So as you can hear, this lead is kind of just droning on while everything else changes, right? Like, the vocal stem and the bass are changing the progression that they're playing. And then this just keeps doing the dun 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 dun. And even over here, that is actually still the same note as that, because you can see, yeah. Same thing as over here, it's just up an octave there instead. The only piece of advice I will give you is, like, you know, if you're making a pattern like this, right, where it's like a little arp, where it's like dun 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 dun, like it's gonna be walking down a scale like that, try, like, if you're gonna have the, and then you want to do like a, right, like kind of that call and response where it's a dun dun and then the dun 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 dun. Essentially, like, try to only use notes like for these two that are already being played over here. So like I use these two. So this way, when you hear them over there, it's gonna make each part a lot more powerful than if you have like different notes there, because it's just like let's say we do that. Right? Like that's just not quite as powerful as where it's really just those two notes over and over with just some extra notes in the top and bottom. So that's how I would think about that. And actually, I'll show you in terms of the scale also, just so you know, essentially this is the root note, this is the sixth, this is the fifth, and that's the minor third. So it's not really playing the scale like just from top to bottom, but it's kind of like, you know, rearranging it while like the basin is very much just based on that root chord. And then for the sound on this one, so this is actually kind of similar to the sound I just showed you, where it's just a saw wave with a bunch of unison on it. We've got it going through a little bit of reverb, and then I have this pedal on here, and you can see I'm blending it. The dry wet's only at 22%, so here's without it. And then with it. So we're still preserving that original sound, but just with a little extra crunch on top now and some more texture. Then I have another auto pan, just kind of like faux side chaining it, so to speak. And then we just have a high pass filter. And this last sound down here, the vocal stab. It's a lot more simple than it would sound. If you look at this, so essentially what we're doing is it's just droning on the root note down here. And then we have this melody happening. And then we have this melody happening. So the way you would write something like this, start with your root note, just have that doom 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 doom, just eighth notes on the root. And then you can go and write the second melody. So then that's just fifth, sixth, back down to the fifth, sixth again, and then minor third. And then on top of that, then you go and add the third melody. And that's essentially what's going to make it work. It's just the fact that you have like these three different groups of notes happening at once. It's essentially what's going to create this. And if you can kind of have them contrast each other too. Like over here, these obviously go up at the same time. But then like, it goes back down there. And that one's going up. Or this one's going down and that's back down again. Like, having them move at the same time and then having like 2 or 3 different melodies or even 4 happening here like this. And then up here, this is 9th, minor 3rd, 5th, 9th again. And then that's just going to sit really nicely over top of all this other stuff. And yeah, so that is just this vocal stab sample. You know, pretty straightforward there. Like obviously, you know, when you're working with vocals, you pretty much just want to work with a sample. And then I just have a bit of reverb and then an auto pan on that. And that's it. We don't need too much extra processing, you know. It's already got a nice sound to it. It's already just like sounding good based on the like what the sound is, how good of a quality the sample is, and then how good quality the notes are being played on it. We don't need to go and worry about too much extra processing. And yeah, so that was going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get this full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video is available at the top of the description on my Bandcamp. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. Thank you so much to everybody who goes to the Bandcamp to pick this up. It really helps support me as well as Patreon, but Bandcamp is a little bit more immediate. And yeah, I really appreciate it. You know, every sale really helps keep me going so I can keep bringing you guys a bunch of awesome new videos like this every single day. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video.